All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Excited to have you all on today. We have our special guest today, Maria Annecchiarico. I butchered it.
No,
I'm
it's not bad
sorry.
at all. Not bad at all.
I'm sorry. So Maria, I've known Maria a long time. Maria recently joined Network Global. We were at Keller Williams together back in the day. Maria has done a lot of short sales. She has an abundant amount of short sale experience. I've used her in the past. She's worked with clients of ours, helped them navigate the short sale process. Now, I know that short sales aren't something that we have seen a lot of recently, but in the past they were abundant and we're starting to see more of them pop up again. So I'm excited to have Maria on today to navigate through the short sale process so you can learn a little bit more about what it entails, as well as learning all of the experience, the information that she has to share today. It's going to be really exciting. So, Maria, I really appreciate you being on, and we'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. And seriously, you were doing great with the last name. So
Yeah,
I was very impressed. All right.
I
Well,
appreciate that.
hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to have this presentation because, as Michael was mentioning, short sales are increasing in numbers. Well, really, foreclosures are increasing in numbers. I hope we never go back to 2008 and 2009 levels. But at the same time, short sales have always been around, and we need to be aware of how they work because I'm seeing more and more that agents who have kind of forgotten about them, and I don't blame agents for forgetting these bad things. They basically they let these people. I've actually had situations where they wouldn't take a listing because maybe the person was in foreclosure, or basically they let sometimes sellers kind of fend for themselves. And this is a missed opportunity for you as the agent because, of course, if you save somebody from foreclosure, they're going to be forever grateful. But also it's unfortunate because, of course, as you well know, when a house goes to foreclosure and then comes back on the market as an REO, it kind of deflates values all around, and we really don't want that to happen. So to avoid, hopefully all of this, we can only reach, I can only reach so many people, but I know you guys want to do the right thing. So that's why Michael and I thought, let's do this. Also, because not only we're seeing foreclosures going up, there's another very concerning trend out there. We're seeing that people that may not be in foreclosure are starting to fall behind on their car payments. I don't know if you guys follow these economic indicators, but a lot of economists think these are major indicators to show where people are in terms of being able to afford their normal life. These are not extravagances that people want to be able to afford. So car payments, so their car repossessions are going up. And another worrisome sign is that credit card debt has been going up a lot. So we had some, just to give you some background to this, we had a lot of savings. The savings rate went up during the COVID years because of all the stimulus and people weren't going out as much, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, those savings were depleted in the next couple of years. And here we are, 2024, and we're in really bad shape. In fact, we're in worse shape than we were before we went into COVID. So we're having a lot of situations, unfortunately, that are kind of accumulating. And all of a sudden, we're seeing foreclosures go up. And we'll go more into the reason for that as well. I have a slide about it just to give you more information about what we're looking at. But one premise I want to do before we jump in here is that there are some technical issues or some technical aspects of short sales that I'm going to go over just very quickly. This is not meant, obviously, to overwhelm you, but it's meant to just give you an idea so that if you do run into a seller who does need help, you're able to at least explain at a high level what they're looking at. All right. So hopefully the idea is that hopefully this helps you get more listings and help more people. All right. So we're going to start with the first slide here. So first of all, there is an idea out there that foreclosures only happen to people who have, the house is in distress, the house is in bad shape. So here we have, basically a bad situation. So a cheap house. And that is just not true. I have done short sales for people that were making $1 million a year, and that had multiple houses. And all of a sudden, because of whatever reason, of a hiccup in their life, because stuff falls through the cracks, life is life and stuff happens. And all of a sudden, this person lost one of the houses. Basically, they fell behind on the mortgage. And now what happens when somebody falls behind on a mortgage? Some of these things you may already be familiar with, but just so we're all on the same page, I'm going to go over, basically what happens, even psychologically. Basically, from a bank's perspective, once you fall behind, they start attaching penalties, interest, unpaid interest, et cetera, on top of a mortgage payment. So your mortgage payment you might have missed, say 1 or 2 payments, and maybe you missed $4,000 in payments. All of a sudden, though, when you go get your payoff, it might be $6,000-$7,000 already. It's very easy for somebody to fall behind and not be able to catch up. Okay. And so in this case, if you are going through a life situation where it is a serious situation, you might never be able to catch up, even if you technically on paper make enough money to pay the mortgage, because now you're falling behind enough to where it's just not even feasible anymore. So I have seen, which is quite unfortunate, a lot of people lose houses. I mean, I think about this all the time. I had a lady going to pre-foreclosure because we did a short sale and we saved her. But she went into pre-foreclosure because one day she found she had a flat tire. And because she had a flat tire, she had to decide whether she was going to pay her mortgage that month or change the tire. Once she used the money to change the tire, she couldn't make a mortgage payment. And it's not like they allow you, the bank is flexible and allows you to maybe make your normal payment plus catch up on that one. The one that you missed, all of a sudden she had penalties and all the things that they add on top. And basically she went right to foreclosure. And these are unfortunate situations that happen way too often. All right, so let's just move on here to the next slide, just to give you an idea of then what a short sale is. And very simply, a short sale is a situation in which the payoff at closing that's supposed to go to the bank is less than what the mortgage is, or the mortgage due to the bank at closing would be. So there is some confusion about this sometimes, because we think of, and I know you as professional realtors don't think this, but a lot of people, for example, out there, they think that as long as the sale of a house is more than the mortgage amount, they think they have equity, and they think that they can pay off the mortgage in full. That's not always the case, as you guys know. Sometimes whatever you are selling the house for is just not enough. Even if the price is higher than the payoff, it doesn't mean that the net will be sufficient to pay the bank. And those are good situations where you're close enough. And then, of course, there are the situations where even more familiar with, which is the house is just upside down, meaning that you can't even sell it for the amount of the payoff to the bank without even accounting for all the other costs that they will incur at closing. And so in that case, you really don't have a lot of choices. Now, I have seen and done short sales with people who were going to foreclosure for, even though the house was not upside down, we were able to do a short sale. But generally speaking, so let's say virtually in all occurrences, a house will have a negative equity position by the time all is said and done. Okay, especially if you add the problem of most likely, most often, I would say probably 99% of the times, the person is behind on payments, which causes the situation we just described with fees and whatnot, and all of a sudden they definitely are upside down. But why am I saying 99% of the time? Because there are times, and I've done short sales where the person was not behind. So I mentioned this, and that's called an imminent situation. Basically, they're imminent default, meaning that they are not in default just yet, But basically, they already know they're not going to have money to make all the payments, say, a month from now, 2 months from now, or whatever. And there are people that are that proactive, which I think is brilliant. In fact, that's the best way to minimize all fallout from going into pre-foreclosure status, and especially to your credit, et cetera, your ability to buy after the fact. And so there are people that, for example, knowing that that's going to happen, they will reach out and say, hey, the house is upside down. I'm not going to have the money to make these payments fairly soon. And we start a short sale, and that is doable. So don't believe, I want to stress this point. If you run into somebody in this situation, don't assume that the person has to be behind. And that also has been something that's happened where these people ask people that weren't familiar with short sales, and the person would tell them, you need to be behind for the bank to do a short sale. This actually causes a lot of problems, puts you on a very expedited timeline where you do really risk foreclosure. There is no need for that. It's a little bit of a different process, but it's actually better for the seller. Unfortunately, though, most sellers don't come to a realtor, don't say anything, or don't take any action until they're behind. So, but generally speaking, basically a short sale is this particular situation. And again, has nothing to do with whether the person is on time with payments or not. So this is just one example, just real quick. Basically assume that we have a listing price of 100,000. Once you take out all your costs, closing costs, etc., commissions, if it needs repairs, you would have a net for the lien holder, say in this case of $89,000. But since the loan payoff amount is 96, then you have a deficiency. Now, in reality, most of the time, the deficiencies are going to be much, much greater than this. But this is just a very vanilla example to show you that these things just happen because of the market being up and down. Depending when the person has to sell, sometimes you have a situation like this. And now, why would a person need to sell? Again, maybe they're not behind yet, but why would a person need to sell? Most often is because of life situations, like they either lost their job, and even if they find another job, say it takes them 3-6 months to find another job, they might not be able to catch up. Or something else has happened, like sometimes they are just moved to a different city because of a job, and they can't keep both houses, and all of a sudden they have to sell it. So even though it might not be a good time to sell, they still are in this situation. You guys know all the reasons why people sell houses at the end of the day. So this is very much the same kind of situation where people just have to do what they have to do, but they happen to not be able to pay off the entire mortgage. All right, so this is something that I do want to stress. There's a couple of slides in here that will show you how most realtors approach short sales as opposed to how a short sale should be approached to make sure that, or to ensure as much as possible that you're going to have a positive outcome. So what we call traditional short sale, I'm referring here to, it's a traditional short sale done by a realtor. I don't know if you guys know that, and I've not checked recently because, again, foreclosures have not been as prominent as in the past, even though they're going up in numbers, especially because of the moratoria that basically expired from COVID. We had a lot of forbearances going on. So anyway, now all the issues are coming up, and there are a lot of people that are going through the process. But basically what NAR did, they did a survey for closing rates on short sales done by realtors, and the closing rate was 25%. And that's not positive in any way, and it's very unfortunate. So just to give you an example, short sale negotiators like myself, I have a closing rate of 98%. And the reason it's not 100% is because we have gone through times when there was a lot of fraud on the banking end. I literally had a short sale denied after we had approval. A bank took the house to sale because this was a bank servicer, and bank servicers, meaning a loan, as you guys know, is owned by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that kind of situation. And then banks are just servicing the loan. And so what happened in this case, the servicer was going to make money by keeping it and keeping it as an REO, because they get paid whatever they get paid for each loan, $500, $1,000 a month to service whatever it is. They actually had an interest in not letting me sell the house. And we had an approval in hand from Fannie Mae, and the bank decided to foreclose anyway. So they would keep the REO for, say, another 6 months to a year. This is complete fraud. And in fact, that particular bank got slapped with $100 million fine shortly, like within a month after that. Clearly, we weren't the only case. So things happen. I am not here to say that every short sale is successful. However, generally speaking, when a short sale doesn't go through, something weird is happening. Another reason why, another thing I've seen from the times I've not been able to close the short sale is the seller wanted to do something weird. There are very clear and rigid rules about what the bank expects the process to do, or how it expects it to happen. And there are things that cannot be done. For example, you cannot have the seller stay in the house. Basically, the seller is not allowed, the borrower is not allowed to benefit from the short sale in terms of, oh, now I get to buy my own house or stay in my own house for less than what the mortgage was before. So you have to have arm's length in these transactions, meaning that the house needs to go, the seller needs to sell when we close on a short sale, and then it goes to a buyer who's unrelated. But I have had sellers where they basically told me at some point that they had their cousin, the cousin wanted to buy the house or whatever weird thing they wanted to do, and then they would live there. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm just not going to get involved with anything like that. So this is why you're never going to have 100%. However, again, short sale specialists normally obviously have much higher closing percentages than 25%. And it's mostly because of the process that I'm going to show you now, so you can see the difference in how we approach short sales. So again, this is a traditional short sale. This is normally what would happen, what I've seen happen. I've seen this with a little bit of a tweak as well, but I'm going to tell you the most common way, and I'm going to tell you the tweak that sometimes is done by the bank. So in this case, normal realtors wanting to do the right thing, they will list a property, say that there is a seller that is facing foreclosures, falling behind on payments, anyway, needs to sell, is a motivated seller. So the realtor thinks that in order to prove to the bank that they're trying, or that to make sure that the seller can pay off the mortgage in full, what they'll do is they'll list the property at a very high price. Okay, they will list the property above market even, because say that the house is worth, I don't know, really the house maybe is worth 175, and then the loan amount is 200. They will list the house as say 225 to make sure that that you can close, basically, right? So this kind of makes sense. Again, the realtor is trying to do the right thing, is trying to make sure that the seller, who has no money to bring to closing, to pay the difference in the mortgage that wouldn't get paid if the house was sold at 175, then the realtor says, okay, let's list it at 225. Now what happens when you list a house above market value? You guys know, it basically just sits there. And it sits there for a long time. And I've seen realtors trying to maybe come down a little bit every now and then, but normally I've seen basically houses listed this way, they will stay on the market for months. 3-4 months. Now, what happens is that because we're waiting for the offer, of course, it's overpriced, so the offer doesn't come. So what happens in that amount of time is that the person gets closer to foreclosure, meaning that they start falling behind, right? There's a reason they were selling in the first place. So whatever hardship was happening, now it's getting compounded by time. So now we're really running against time. So the realtor will wait for the offer, and maybe it is close enough to the mortgage payoff, and so that maybe it isn't. Whatever offer they get, they will submit to the bank. All right. At this point, what does the bank do? The bank has no idea what the house is worth. And so they will send out, they will do a broker's price opinion, which just means it's like an appraisal done by a realtor. All right. Now, sometimes they do send out appraisers if it's an FHA loan, but generally speaking, they'll send out an appraiser or a realtor to give them a valuation for the property. And normally, no matter what it is, it's called a BPO, broker's price opinion. Now, the BPO agent will come out And then what are they trying to do? Of course, they see that you listed the house so high, and they will normally confirm your value. Again, they think that they are helping by saying, yes, it's going to be this amount, right? Because as you guys know, when you look at comps, you can find comps in any price range. So of course we think we have to do, and I know this because I've spoken with many realtors. Again, this is meant with good intentions. That they think that the higher the offer to give to the bank, the more chances there are of approval. Okay, which logically you would expect that to make sense. All right. So in this case, the BPO comes in high as well. And then, of course, then there is a negotiation, right? Because what's another thing that realtors will do to make sure the bank thinks, because this is another thing, realtors think that if you tell the bank the house is really nice, and that the seller is really nice, the borrower is taking good care of the house and all these things, this will look good in the eyes of the bank. Okay, again, this makes complete sense. So I don't blame anybody for thinking this way. Unfortunately, what the bank is hearing is that this house is worth more than what it is. Okay, because at the end of the day, they step in the shoes of the seller and they want to negotiate with a buyer. This is quite normal. Doesn't matter if you give the bank $1 million offer, they're still going to negotiate and want $1,050,000. This is completely normal because this is their job. So you do this negotiation with lenders because now they are using as a guideline the BPL, which is going to be high, and the fact that you listed a high as well, which means you believe the value is that much higher. Most normally takes a long time to even come to an agreement. If you do, generally speaking, at this point, the person's already going to foreclosure. It's taking a long time. But say that you receive an approval somehow and you go to closing, it's still taking a long time where, the seller had to deal with all these things. You were risking foreclosure. He was risking foreclosure, but in real life, this is how, again, most people end up in foreclosure. Okay. So this process, sometimes people get lucky. That's why there's a 25% closing rate for realtors, because this process really set up improperly, because again, there is a lot of time. It really works against you in a foreclosure situation, okay? Because especially in non-judicial states like Missouri, unfortunately, we are in a non-judicial state. That means that all a bank has to do to repossess a house is, once the person falls behind by 90 days, okay? And this is a federal rule, it's nationwide. Once you fall behind 90 days, you are in default. You're officially in default. And at that point, the bank cannot accept partial payments anymore. So what they do is they will, and again, this is valid everywhere, and I'll go into the difference with Missouri in a moment, which is really our biggest problem, is that in other states, so everywhere, you will have, the bank will go to an attorney, a foreclosure attorney, and basically it's called, they call them successor trustees, in case you're curious, because sometimes you see this in descriptions or on title where it says that the loan was referred to a successor trustee. They're talking about foreclosure attorneys. These attorneys basically will send an acceleration letter to the borrower. That acceleration letter has two purposes. One is that it lets the borrower know that they are in default, and that if this is wrong for any reason, if this is incorrect information or they don't own the loan, or it's an error of any kind, then they need to reply to the attorney and say, this is not me, or this is wrong, right? And two is that if they don't get an answer within 30 days, unless again there is an error, the entire loan amount is due, including penalties, attorney costs, all these things. So now it's going to be a good chunk of money in addition to what the original payoff was. The reason they do that is because, of course, they have to give the borrower the ability to cure this problem. Now, in the past, it used to be easy to cure it. You go refinance the house. Remember the good times? I don't know if you guys have been in business as long as I have, but I remember the good times when people used to refinance for like 125% of value. Okay. And that would solve this issue. But this has not been possible for a long time. So really the 30 days go by, nobody's able, maybe somebody is, but generally speaking, people are not able to bring this up to to par to cure this, and all of a sudden the bank can foreclose. Now, in other states, because it's judicial, they have to go through a whole process. I do short sales in other states as well, and in judicial states, like for example New York, my goodness, it takes years to foreclose. Unfortunately, in Missouri, it only takes 21 days because all the bank has to do after the acceleration period has expired, they have to publish the notice of default, basically the auction date, for 21 days. That's all they have to do. Now, it takes a few days to set that up, so maybe that gives you an additional month. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because again, time is absolutely of the essence, especially if you reach a seller who's already 1, 2, 3 months behind or already in foreclosure. So I deal a lot with people that are a week or two from foreclosure, and that is a challenge. Of course, it's what it's I'm used to it, but it is very, very difficult, and you would not be able, obviously, to use a traditional short sale process because you just don't have the time for that. So we use a slightly different process that I'm going to show to you next. So let's go to the next slide. But before we do, I just want to, and we talked about this a little bit, but I'm just going to go through the slide very quickly. So again, you can have the bank foreclose before there's even a buyer. If you have this property listed for months, not dropping the price, so you drop the price, but again, not fast enough, because as you guys know, when you misprice a property, even if you're dropping the price, now you need to drop it even more than what to get an offer than what you would have had to do if you priced it right from the beginning. So this, unfortunately, is something that we're familiar with from a psychological perspective. Buyers now think that because the listing is stale, there was something wrong with the property, and maybe there isn't. Or maybe there is, but it's not as bad as they think just because the property has been now listed on the market for a long time. So unfortunately, it's how it is. So then we have situations where buyers walk away from negotiations. Every time you sell a house to, or you put a house under contract in a short sale situation with a retail buyer, they have an idea in their mind they're going to get this house in a certain amount of time. I've had very few retail buyers wait until the short sale was done. Short sales on average right now take between 3 and 6 months, which is not a super long time, but it's a long time if you're, say, a first-time home buyer or a home buyer that just wants to move into a house. Not only, but because there is a lot of uncertainty, they don't hear anything because the bank is processing other stuff in the background. They think, oh, this is never going to go through. So 50% of the time, I would say, just based on my own experience, retail buyers walk away. You will lose a buyer in the middle of negotiation. This is no good, because then you can only do a short sale if you have a buyer, meaning that the bank stops then and you have to find another buyer. Okay, so that's an issue. That's definitely I want you guys to be aware of. And then, and so at that point, again, if it takes you a long time to find a buyer, the bank can also foreclose there. And then the biggest issue, even if you do find a buyer who stays, is that because you had interior BPO done, the bank again thinks, because they think very highly of the BPOs because it's a third party that was sent, so they assume it's an absolute number. Now, you guys know that there are no absolute numbers. I could have 10 agents look at a house and they would give me 10 different values. That's why normally we use ranges, right? Because there is no $1 value that's like, that's the value of this house. All right, it depends on what comps you're looking at, what discounts you're allowing for, say, something being not as updated or needing repairs, whatever it is. So it's an opinion at the end of the day. That's why it's called broker's price opinion. But the bank, of course, takes this into account because they paid for it. It's a third party, and they assume that it's pretty close to what it needs to be. So, but because we let this person in when we had this high offer, and and they saw how nice the house is, or whatever it is, the house might be in disrepair as well, whatever the situation is, but we talked it up because we're trying to help. All of a sudden we have a BPO that's higher than where it needs to be. All right, so, and here just a tidbit that if you do that process that I mentioned, just to have a BPO done after you initiate the short sale takes over a month normally. So we'll add at least a month to the process. And again, when time is of the essence, this is dangerous. All right, so let's go now to look at how short sales, the best way to do short sales, basically. And I'm calling it, this is not a technical name, it's just to give an idea. I call it investor leveraged short sale. All right, this is how negotiators normally, or I should say successful negotiators. So it's in negotiators that will just do the order of things we said. You just, as an agent, do everything we said in a traditional short sale, and then the negotiator will just say, okay, I'll negotiate with the bank on your behalf. These are loss mitigators, but again, they're not really doing the entire process, like the way that a short sale negotiator would do it. Like, for example, myself, I do things in the order that I'm showing you here, and this is what I definitely recommend. All right, so what we do is we list the property and submit the offer to lien holders. Why do I have list property in quotes? A property per bank guidelines must be in the MLS, must be listed. All right. And then different, depending on different investors. So Fannie Mae versus Freddie Mac versus FHA. They will have different rules for how long the property has to be active in the market before you're even allowed to accept an offer. So they have very weird rules that you need to be familiar with the type of rules, because otherwise, if you screw up, then you got to go back and do it again. You got to activate it again, which, as you guys know, is kind of weird. It's kind of hard to do if you already have a buyer. You would have to mutually release him. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you would have to do. So that's why I'm saying let's do it right. So we list the property up front. But the goal is, because we don't have a lot of time. And again, I told you guys, I deal with stuff that sometimes gets brought to me like 2 weeks, 1 week before foreclosure. However, I've had foreclosure postponed the day of foreclosure often. So this is doable. But the goal is to submit all the information that the bank requires to make a decision the day, all at the same time. Okay, so we are not now scattering the process, saying I'm going to list it, I'm going to send the listing to the bank, or I'm going to wait for the offer, et cetera, et cetera. We're not doing any of that. What we are doing is that we are listing the property and putting it under contract almost at the same time. Again, I'm going to give you an example. Say Fannie Mae requires 5 days of active listing in the MLS before you can accept an offer. So we will list the property, have it active for 5 days. By then, we already have an investor offer. We use investors because investors don't walk away. Okay, they will wait. I've had short sales that have taken 2 years because we went through bankruptcies, divorce, etc. My longest short sale actually has taken 2.5 years. They don't take this long normally. Don't be scared. But basically, an investor will never walk away. You just call them when they're ready to close, and they're ready to close. All right. So we submit the offer, we prepare the offer, we submit everything together. This also includes, and I have a list of everything that needs to be included in a package in a later slide that you'll see. But basically, it's a bunch of documents that support the need for the borrower to have a short sale done, meaning it's not that he just doesn't feel like paying the mortgage anymore. It basically can't. So we have to document that. And then again, the listing, the bank requires the property to be listed for a certain amount of time. The offer, because they will not start a short sale until they have an offer, unless it's a bank-led short sale, which is more similar to a traditional short sale. And I already said those don't work because it takes a long time and the person ends up in foreclosure. And so in this case, basically, we submit everything the same day. And then we demand, and I say demand like tongue in cheek because I cannot make banks do anything. I wish. But basically, we tell them, hey, you have the complete package. I need you to, basically, we ask for them to do the BPO. And it might take multiple times, but basically, we rush them. I've had to escalate stuff because, again, when you're dealing with 1 or 2 days before foreclosure, you need to get the BPO. Generally, a bank will not stop. Generally, a bank will not stop foreclosure unless you have a broker's price opinion on file. Okay. Of course, there are exceptions to that as well, because, for example, there are different ways of stopping foreclosures based on other reasons that have come up, because short sales, the process has changed. It continues changing over time. So there are new rules right now, but generally speaking, the bank will only stop a foreclosure if they have a BPO on file. Now, this BPO, though, has to be a low value. Because if it is not a low value, the bank, even though you may have a perfectly good offer, the bank will not even entertain it. They will not stop foreclosure because it costs them money to stop foreclosure. All right. Now, there is a rule where you can stop it. You can have it postponed for 7 days and it's free. But if you stop it for 7 days and then they have to cancel it, or postpone it is what they call it. They don't really say canceling, but that's the point. They would have to hire the attorney again. It costs them another, say, $2,500. So they would rather not do that. So generally speaking, they will demand to have a BPO on file. This BPO again has to be low, because if it's not low, then the bank thinks that they can do better in an REO situation, meaning they will go ahead and foreclose. All right. So the point is that we're trying to paint a picture of this property where it is in the bank's best interest to let us do the short sale, because they're not going to make the money that they think they're going to make. All right. Because they might say, well, our loan is 200,000, which means the house must be worth 200,000, but maybe it isn't. For all we know, the house is trashed, right? They don't know. And so for that reason, we want to have all these pieces in order. I also always send a contractor's bid as well, just to make my point. These packages that we send are like 70 pages long. All right. This needs to happen in a very short amount of time. So fun. At any rate. And so then we start, if we do manage to have them postpone the foreclosure, then we start negotiating with the lien holders, with the lien holder and other lien holders. Because generally speaking, when you have a situation where the person is going to foreclosure, there might be multiple liens on title. I've seen titles that have like 10 liens, sometimes more, and some are really big. So you're going to have to negotiate with all of these. Basically, the job of a short sale negotiator is to clear title, if you want to call it that. All right. So you can actually close, and that's all we're doing. But you are negotiating with the lien holders. If you come to an agreement, of course, you receive approval. But what is the key here is that, again, the broker's price opinion must be low and the investor's offer must be low. Okay. Which is the opposite of what I mentioned earlier, that we think as realtors, I want to get as high an offer as I can, right? It looks good to the bank. There's more of a chance they'll take it. That's actually the opposite. I know it's counterintuitive, but this is why. Again, if the bank thinks the house is really nice and they can do better, they can sell it easily as an REO, meaning real estate owned is what it stands for. It means the bank owns it. Once they take it back from the borrower, they own the property and they can resell it easily. They will not do a short sale. So our goal, in the interest of our buyer, is to motivate the bank to do a short sale. The only way the bank is motivated to do a short sale, they don't care about the person, okay? All they care about is when they weigh their odds, is like, does it make more sense to take it back or to allow you to do a short sale? The way that we prove to them that it's better to do a short sale is by showing them the house is worth a lot less than what they think it is. So again, low investor offer and low, which means low listing price. Okay, because we start with a listing price, because the bank is looking at that saying, well, you think it's worth 200. Why are you bringing me this offer that's $40,000? And I'm literally talking about very low offers like that. Why? Because first of all, this is a misunderstanding for realtors all the time. So I just want to mention it. We think that I've seen realtors think that when they do a short sale, they're working for the bank. They have to do what the bank says. Now, to some extent you must, but you're not working for the bank. It is not in your seller's best interest to bring to the bank the highest and best offer. And I've heard realtors say, it is my duty to bring the bank the highest and best offer. That is not true. Your client is not the bank. Your client is the seller. And again, if you bring your highest and best offer to the bank, doesn't matter how good this offer is, the bank will counter, which means you don't have it. The buyer might not increase his offer above where they are already, because this was the highest and best. All of a sudden the person goes to foreclosure. Okay. So what we do instead, again, we submit these very, very low offers. And you might think, oh my goodness, that's ridiculous. This house is worth 175. Why are you submitting an offer for 35,000? Because of what I said. They will make the bank stop. Now, you don't need to worry about the bank. The bank is a huge organization with a ton of money. They'll send out appraisers. They'll send out a BPO. BPO agents still do multiple BPOs if they want to, and they will negotiate. So it doesn't matter if you offer 35 or you offer 50 or whatever you offer, they'll come back and ask you for whatever they think the house is worth. All right. So you don't need to worry about that, because I've also heard comments where people are like, oh, I can't believe you're trying to take advantage. You're submitting these low offers. That is the point, is that the bank then has to stop and do the process. And then the bank will take whatever the house is really worth. But we definitely don't want to don't want to cause a negotiation that's above market value, because then it's not going to work. So this is very important. That's why I wanted to stress it. So really, it's counterintuitive. It's the opposite of what we normally do. In fact, listing price and offer price need to be pretty much in line. And then the bank might be more prone, even though there is not a lot of time for them to do this. If you're too close to foreclosure, they might be more prone and more interested in getting a BPO, because they're like, whoa, we didn't know this house was worth so little. Okay, so that's that. Again, once you negotiate with all the lien holders, there's negotiation. The price will have to increase to a certain extent, and then you close. And then this has obviously a very high probability of closing this way. Okay, one thing I will say, because I did mention in the previous slide where I said the broker's price opinion will come in too high, the value will come in too high if you do a traditional short sale, because you don't really have anything to anchor it. So you're just going to tell them, oh, this is nice, that's nice, so great, whatever it is. In this particular case, we want the BPO to come in as low as possible, which means that we will be pointing out things that are wrong with the house. Okay, so it's the opposite of what you would do if there was like you're selling a normal house and the appraiser is coming out, and you're telling him, hey, the kitchen is new, the bathroom is new, we repainted it, you want the value to be higher. We do the opposite with a BPO in a short sale situation, because again, we need the value to be lower, because the bank will negotiate higher, right? So we need to leave room for the offer to go through. And if it doesn't work for the investor, it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt us, because say that the bank negotiates to a point where it doesn't make sense for an investor, that's fine, because at that point we have a value that is doable, and we activate it again in the MLS, and now we can get a retail buy, because at this point the process has already been done. It doesn't take a long time, so maybe in a month or two we can close, right? Especially if we have an approval, or we're trying to get an approval but we know the bank will take it at this value. So you see, this process makes much more sense, because we start lower and then we always have the ability to go higher, as opposed to starting so high that you cannot go any higher, and then it's the kiss of death. All right, let's move on. I'm keeping an eye on the time here. I think we have a few more minutes. All right, so this, I just wanted to show you how many inputs, how many people really participate when we do a short sale. So of course there's a realtor, which makes all the difference, because again, a lot of issues I have found with sellers that come to me when it was too late, asking me, oh, can we do something? Normally a realtor had already started a process where it's very hard to come back from the wrong process. If you have listed a property too high, it's very hard to convince the bank that you made a mistake, especially if you got an offer, a retail offer that was high, and all of that. At that point, it's kind of hard to now paint this different picture for the bank. And then, of course, we need a homeowner that's going to be open to the process, because they're going to have to submit a lot of financial information and all of that. And then you need a negotiator, unless you are willing to do this, of course. And then we need the investor catalyst. The reason I'm calling it catalyst is because we need an offer to start. As I mentioned, the bank will not start a short sale unless you have a full packet, which includes an offer. And you want the investor, because they're just going to let you do your process. They're not going to bug you, and then walk away in the middle of it. Because if a buyer walks away, it's really a problem. So we want to avoid that at all costs. All right. So the myth about short sales is that they're temporary, meaning that they don't exist all the time. They do, unfortunately, because life happens. Short sales are necessary very often. We haven't heard about a lot of short sales the last few years. I've been doing short sales the whole time, because of course, they bring them to me, but they are out there. Okay, I was just dealing, as I said, with something in New York. I hate doing short sales in New York. They take forever because it's a judicial state. So, but basically, they still happen. It's just that we don't have as many as we used to have in 2008. Thank goodness. But they will always happen. All right, this is something that's it's always helpful to be aware of this option for our sellers. All right, so here I just wanted to throw in some statistics. You can read through these, but basically what's happening, excuse me, is that is what I was mentioning earlier, that during COVID, a lot of people, as you well know, there were moratoria on repayments, and so there were forbearance agreements done, et cetera, but those have run out. So now we've seen numbers increase, foreclosure numbers increase in the last couple of years, and 2024 has gotten even worse. And so we are dealing with this. Now, keep in mind that a lot of the foreclosures that should be happening are not happening because there is a weakness in the economy that one, we're in an election year. And so you guys know that a lot of stuff gets smoothed out so as not to cause, people to make one decision or the other. And I get that. That's fine. So we don't know what this is going to look like starting 2025. But basically, a lot of banks have been more conservative in foreclosing because they don't want the market to take a hit. For example, it's the same thing that's happening from a office of commercial lending perspective. A lot of office buildings are being held by banks. They're trying to not foreclose on a lot of places, and when they do foreclose, they hold them on their books because they don't want to put them back on the market at very low prices, because this would cause, they're afraid, it's such a huge problem, they're afraid it would cause a systemic issue. And not only, a lot of people think that, because we all know, I'm assuming you guys have heard of this huge issue with commercial real estate right now because of the offices being empty. And we're talking about countrywide here, not just in Missouri. And there's a lot of that going on. I live downtown, actually, and there's a lot of that going on in our own city. But basically, the banks are trying to, again, hold on to things, smooth things out as much as they can, because there is a huge problem. And a lot of people believe, well, that's commercial, I don't care about that, that doesn't really matter. You guys obviously are savvier than that. And at the end of the day, these are the same banks. These are the same banks. If they're taking losses on one end, it's going to affect everything. And this is why we're teetering here. And this is the reason why we're doing this right now, because more and more people will be affected. All right, so let's move to the next slide, and we're almost done here. So this, I just wanted to show you real quick, and not that you need to memorize this or anything, but just to give an idea of what is included in a short sale package. So if you do run into a seller, you can kind of explain, hey, there's a lot of stuff, that the bank will want. The main things are, first of all, keep in mind, banks do not allow electronic signatures. Actually, it's a law in the United States where you cannot sign electronically on anything that's mortgage related. So you cannot do that at closing. We don't sign electronically closing documents. And same thing when you do a short sale, because you're dealing with a mortgage, they don't take electronic signatures. So everything has to be a wet signature, which of course adds a layer of complexity when you're running against time, but it's what it is. So we'll need a cover letter explaining the situation. What is the cover letter for? What are we trying to do when we submit a package to the bank? Again, we're trying to convince them, persuade them that they're better off waiting, not foreclosing, and waiting until we show them the entire picture of what's going on. So we really are giving them a picture of the situation. They don't know the borrower from Adam. It's a loan number to them. So what we do with these packages is that we show them, one, this is a real person going through a real hardship, and this is all the documentation to show you so you have all the data you need to make your decision, and hopefully to stop the foreclosure so we can go through the process. So in this case, we have a cover letter, third-party authorization for yourself if you're going to be negotiating this. Because otherwise, obviously, the bank is not going to disclose private information about the borrower to anybody else. Then we have the listing and the MLS printout to prove that we have the house listed. They do look at the number of days. For some rules, as I said, it's 5 days. Sometimes it has to be over a weekend as well. There are different rules with different investors. And I'm talking, again, not about the lender. I'm talking about the investor that owns the loan, which is information that we need to find out who actually owns the loan. Very rarely a borrower will know who owns the loan because loans get sold on the secondary market, as you guys know. So then we have the offer. And again, this has to be a complete package for the buyer. So it will be an offer, and you're going to use an investor. Please use an investor offer. So you're going to need LLC, articles of organization, operating agreements, all the stuff that they would want. This is stuff that you probably have seen if you've taken anything to closing on a regular sale with an investor involved. with an LLC involved, company involved, you know this is the stuff title companies ask you for. So again, our job is to submit everything up front, so we are not delaying the process. Otherwise, the bank has to come back and ask us for all this additional information. They will, after they stop foreclosure, they will ask you for additional information. But the point is to submit as much as possible up front so they do stop the foreclosure. So, and this is why short sales take a long time, because even after they stop the foreclosure, they'll still ask for so many more documents, but that's all right, because at that point we have time. Then we send a CMA. And again, and here I have a note for how to pull and present comps, is what I mentioned. Remember, if you remember nothing else, remember that we want to give the bank an impression the house is worth as little as possible. So when we pull our comps, we're not pulling the highest, most beautiful comps we can find. We're pulling comps that are still comps. I'm not saying make up stuff and go find them, 10 miles away from where the house is. But if we have a range, we would show the ones on the lower end of the range, again, to give our seller a chance. And then we have, I always send contractors bids and photos, because most of these houses, although again, they don't have to be in distress, but most of these houses need repairs. So we do want to let the bank know about that, because they would have no idea that that's the situation. And that's why they think a house is worth a certain amount when it isn't. And then we have to send a net sheet or a HUD one. Okay, now they call it settlement statement, because now they don't call it HUD one anymore. But basically, you want to show the bank what they would net, because they work all their numbers based on what their net is. And there are rules about how much they have to net depending on the investor. But I'm not going to bore you with that, because it doesn't really matter. So what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of rules that banks have to follow. That's not our concern right now. And then, of course, there's going to be seller support and documentation, where we prove that the guy really doesn't have the ability to catch up this loan. Okay, so it will be financial documents, and there is a list here. Now, the beauty of this, though, is that I did make a note here on the second to last bullet point, where it says note individual income versus family expenses. Why? Because when the bank looks at a seller's income to see if they're the only person on the loan, for example, even though there's a family living in the house, even if the spouse works, it's only the borrower's income that is considered in terms of, can this person afford to maintain this mortgage? Okay, that's actually a benefit. Although when it comes to looking at expenses for the borrower, you can use the entire family expenses. Okay, it doesn't matter. The spouse could be making $1 million a month. It doesn't matter, because the borrower is the person assigned on the loan. So that's actually a benefit that helps borrowers being able to be considered for a short sale. And then, of course, there are different types of hardship. I mean, you can read the list here, but you guys are out in the field, stuff that happens to people. Any of these things can happen. All right. Short sale process. Again, just very quickly here, because I don't want to overwhelm you, but basically the point, I just wanted to point out some things, like you can find sellers in foreclosure. You can find them, in many different ways. So you can do your normal canvassing that you do to find your sellers. But generally speaking, one of the telltale signs, unless they're already in foreclosure, at that point you have a list pendants and basically a notice of default, is, for example, when they have a change in trustees. Again, trustees stands for attorneys, so that's one of the things sometimes pops up in public records. And then, how do you approach sellers? Again, the idea, excuse me, the idea is that sellers really are very confused about this process. I know it's confusing. Okay, banks are not trying to make it easier for any of us. So of course, sellers will be overwhelmed. The point is, when I speak with a seller about this, I really keep it very high level when I tell them, hey, we need to convince the bank that the house is worth less than what they think it's worth. Clearly, they don't know that the house is upside down. That's why they foreclose, right? They think they can make their money back. And because of this, we will do this process. They don't need to know all the ins and outs. But the main thing I tell them is, please, we're going to need you to submit all this data and to be all this information. And you need to be on top of it. You need to be responsive. So I kind of prepare them for the process, I do tell them that while there are no guarantees, if the process is done properly, very high degree of success. So there's a high probability of success. That's all that we can say to them, right? I always speak in terms of probability because obviously I don't have a crystal ball and I cannot control the bank. So the point is, when we deal with these sellers, we can't really tell them, oh, this is, we're going to list it as high as possible, whatever. In fact, what I tell them, I do prepare them to this. I say, listen, this is important, and I do want to mention to you guys, when a sale is successful, when a short sale is successful, the bank will 99.9% of the time, I think only one time in all the short sales, I've done hundreds of short sales, I think one time this didn't happen, but it was okay because we negotiated it. But 99% of the time, the bank will forgive the deficiency balance. What does that mean? The deficiency balance is the amount by which the payout to the bank at closing is short of what the payoff was. So say again, the payoff was $200,000 and they got 175 at closing. That $25,000 difference is called deficiency balance. And generally speaking, virtually all the time, when you have a successful short sale, that's part of the approval process that the bank will forgive the $25,000. This is a huge benefit to sellers. They basically won't have collections. The bank will not go after them. And also the fact that they do a short sale appears much better on their credit and in terms of buying a house than having a foreclosure. Okay. We don't know what the real impact is of a short sale in terms of credit. But there was talk that it's about only 30 points. Now, why is a seller's credit hit when they go into a foreclosure situation, though, even if the short sale is successful? Normally because they're behind on payments. This is why if you ever find a seller who's afraid they're going to fall behind, you can start the process right away if the house is upside down, or if you don't think that you can get it sold before they fall behind, because that way they don't have the late payments, which is really what hits the credit the hardest, right? So there are just lots of benefits to this process. In fact, there's one more, that if the person has any type of security clearance, if they go into foreclosure, they could actually lose their job or lose their security clearance. So short sales are very helpful in terms of, they're not something, I always tell my clients, I say, I'm not selling you short sale. I wish you didn't need to do it, okay? But as the alternative to foreclosure, it's 100 times better. That's all there is to it. So really, the work that you do with a seller, if anything like this, if you run it across anything like this, is really you're explaining to them all these things. So you don't need to go into the details what needs to happen because you'll take care of it later. And the other thing is you want to prepare them to the fact that, because of what I said in terms of deficiency balance, that we're going to basically get an investor offer, and it's going to be as low as possible. And this is why, because we need to convince the bank not to foreclose on you. Okay. And then the bank will take care of itself. Like if they think it's low, they'll come back and ask you for what they want. So we don't need to worry about the bank. This is just a negotiation process, right? And you just want to tell them so they don't balk at whatever, which normally they don't, because sellers in this situation are desperate and they only just want you to help them. I don't remember ever having issues with this, but I've heard of people saying, or normally realtors, because again, we think we're doing the right thing by pricing a property right or even high, which in this case, unfortunately, that's not the case. All right, so how to submit offers, we talked about it. We talked about what a package looks like. And then again, you submit them to the bank however way they want it submitted. Normally they still use faxes. I can't even believe it. And there's a list of documents they'll ask you for, and that's fine. We talked about how to handle the BPO. Basically, you want to be present and you want to point out all the things that are wrong. Don't be obnoxious, because nobody likes to be told what to do. But I mean, these are normal people like we are. They can't see things. I don't know if the furnace is working or not working. This is just an agent looking around, right? So you do want to help them. They also want to do a good job. Obviously, if they're aware that something is broken, they want to notate it, and that will affect value. And then there are times when the BPO comes in wrong, no matter what. And then you would have to dispute it. That's a whole different process. It's complex, but it happens. I would say 30% of the time we've had to dispute BPOs. And then when I talk about how to handle the approval process, because again, the approvals, especially if you have multiple liens, you need to time them because approvals only last 30 days. And so you don't want to get an approval that's easy to get and it takes you 2 weeks to get it, and then you get it. And by the time the bank gives you their approval, this one has already expired. But you also don't want to get an approval from the bank where you only have 30 days to close, and then you got to go out and chase the other approvals from all the other lien holders, and it might take you longer than a month to get them. By that time, your main approval has expired, and the bank does not have to extend an approval. If you do not close, you are risking not being able to close ever. Okay, so there are a few intricacies just in that aspect as well. And then, of course, how to close. This is one of those things, guys. It's a puzzle, and you definitely want to babysit it the whole time. All right. So different rules. I already mentioned these. That basically different investors have different rules for how they want short sales done. So you do want to find out what that is. If you have time, normally what you do is, because I never have time, as I said, I get most people like last minute. What I do is, while I'm preparing my package, which takes at least 3 days to prepare, it's so much work, but because we're submitting everything at once. But while I do that, I immediately submit my authorization to release information to the bank so they can talk to me, and then I inquire as to the type of loan and all of that, so I know the rules in terms of the listing, etc. So some of these things have to happen kind of at the same time. But again, I don't want you guys to be overwhelmed with this. I'm just telling you these things so you're familiar with them. You don't need to remember most of this. And then one thing I will say, if it is an FHA loan, because most people, they don't know what loan they have, but they do normally know when they have an FHA loan. HUD has very specific rules where they mostly only allow short sales for owner occupants. They only allow them for owner occupants, and the seller cannot have left the house more than 12 months prior to starting the short sale. Okay, so there have been times where if you're unsure, don't go to the bank and say, "Oh, the owner has been gone for 2 years," because they won't even start a short sale. Okay, so if there's still stuff in the house, for all I know, the person still lives there. Again, we are trying to help our sellers because they are our clients, which doesn't mean I'm not suggesting in any way that we lie to the bank. Let's be clear on this. When I sleep, I want to sleep well at night. I don't want to worry when I close something. I don't want to worry they've done something wrong. As I mentioned before, I've walked away from deals where people were trying to do the wrong thing, and I'm like, I will not be a part of this. But when you are sure there's still stuff in the house, or maybe the person is going back to the house all the time, they really just want to know that the person is not an investor. They don't want to help investors, and that the person is still keeping an eye on the house, because it's part of FHA guidelines when you take out the loan that you're going to be taking care of the house. So now if you go to them and tell them, well, the house has been abandoned for 2 years, obviously it doesn't bode well. All right. So I'm just saying we have to be careful when we speak with a bank in terms of the information that we disclose. And again, this is part of your duty to the seller to not disclose information that could harm him. You have no responsibility towards the bank. You don't have to tell them whatever, right? You give them the information that they require, financial hardship, condition of the house, et cetera, but to a certain extent, we still have confidentiality agreements with our clients. And then one way that people use, I've seen this probably 60% of the time, well, 50% of the time, probably it's 50-50. I've seen people just use bankruptcy to delay foreclosure dates because, again, in places like Missouri, which is non-judicial, the foreclosure happens so quickly that sometimes you don't have time to submit a packet or whatever it is, or the bank refuses to stop foreclosure. And I've seen sellers actually file bankruptcy because at that point, they already have a bunch of bills anyway. They're behind on other stuff anyway. They don't even care if they have to file bankruptcy. But that allows you the time, because the bank cannot foreclose while a bankruptcy is active. And that allows you time to do the process. All right. You just have to wait until the bankruptcy is discharged or dismissed, depending on the type, or the asset has been removed from bankruptcy, to then get your approval. It adds time. As I said, my longest short sale was because I had a bankruptcy and a divorce in the middle of it, and it took forever. But doesn't have to. Sometimes you can remove an asset from a bankruptcy very quickly. All right. I hope I didn't completely overwhelm you with this. I know it's a lot. I can talk about short sales. I mean, for 3 days, basically, there are so many intricacies, but that's why I want to bring home the point that really, when it comes to you and dealing with sellers, it's a matter of letting them know that there are options, of course, and that, again, we're not going to undermine their probability of success by listing it wrong or waiting, because time is of the essence. And I think, as I said, I hope that it is clear now that it is in the seller's best interest that we actually get offers and list it lower than what we think it should be listed, within reason, obviously. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, or I've completely discouraged everybody from ever touching a short sale.
No, it was really, really good information. We really appreciate it. We do have some questions.
Okay.
I have one actually real quick as well before we dive into everybody else's. If someone comes across a client and they're behind on payments, they feel they're a good candidate for a short sale, and they do not want to take this process on themselves, how does that work with them referring it to you?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, I negotiate them. I have investors. We always submit cash offers because, again, we want to move quickly and we want the bank to like what we submit. But basically, it's just like a normal situation. So a normal referral. So not only, but I actually give, because I get paid as a negotiator. I give the entire commission to the agent. So basically, and I've done many, many short sales for agents. As you well know, I've done them for you and your mom as well. But basically, the reason I give the entire commission now is because very often the bank now these days, they cut the commission. So I don't want to take anything, basically, and basically I pay out when the property closes. So in that case, the realtor doesn't have to do anything, but and they can do as much or as little as they want. So say that you wanted your sign in the yard, you can have your sign in the yard. I never put signs in the yard, especially with short sales. I don't, because a lot of sellers don't like that. They don't want everybody to know that they're going through this. So yeah, I mean, it's very easy. Basically, if you run across a client, you can give me a call and I'll tell you what's the best way to handle it. And of course, you would get paid your commission.
So yeah, so I think that's super important for people to hear. So just to clarify that, for everybody watching right now, if you have a client that's in short sale, you can essentially refer this to Maria. She will handle the short sale end of it, negotiating with the bank, all of that. You basically get the listing. You still get compensated your commission. Yeah. And Maria gets a short sale fee basically from the bank. So I want everybody to realize that.
To be clear, I don't get it from the bank. The bank does not.
From
normally in the deal, somehow I manage to, sometimes it's the buyer that pays. We do things, as I said, according to rules, and rules change all the time. So you are not incorrect. It used to be possible to do this, but it hasn't been possible for a long time. Yeah. But I just want to say one thing. It's not guaranteed that I will take the short sale, because the short depends on what process you're in. If you're just or at what point of the process. If the short sale has already been initiated, there might be no way to salvage it if it's been done the way that I mentioned originally. So what I would recommend is, if you are dealing with a client in a short sale, I'm happy to just be a resource and just help you as much as I can. If it's something that I can negotiate and I know there's a high probability I'll be able to close it because it hasn't been initiated yet, absolutely, I'm happy to help. But I don't take on just every single short sale. I don't want to give the wrong impression. So what I would recommend is, again, if you're running into something like this, just give me a call. I'm always available. And if I cannot take it, I will help you as much as possible so you know how to handle it. In fact, I've done this with one of your agents already, and I hope that she'll be able to, to be successful with it.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. So another question, Lisa Roger said, thank you. I needed a refresher. I used to do short sales years ago, but haven't in quite a while. Good information. So
good for you that you haven't had to do them in a while. Yeah. They are fun, I'll say that.
A lot of work, that's for sure. David Eubank asked, any suggestions on how to use this information on locating likely sellers in distress and developing a process for working with them to sell or resolve with the bank? So I actually, go ahead, Maria. Yeah.
No, Mike, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I posted a link. I mean, you can buy the list of people in distress. So you could do that, but go ahead. If you'll probably have a better answer.
No, and that's wonderful that you did that. Absolutely. Yeah, there are many lists you could purchase. As I mentioned, there are different steps for where a person is going to basically end up in foreclosure, where if you're just looking at the foreclosure process, you have notice of defaults. They have different names in different states, but notice of defaults, list pendants. The assignment of successor trustee is basically when the bank has referred the file to attorneys. That stuff shows up on title. I know that title companies have lists as well. So there's many ways to get these people. And unfortunately, sometimes, for example, I get the legal papers and I get people that are already in foreclosure. So it's the 21-day, basically, public notice of the auction. And of course, that's last minute. That doesn't give you a lot of time to do things. So you do need to have your process in place. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. There used to be a way to get names of people that were behind on payments, and you can't do that anymore. That's not available anymore. There used to be lists about people that were behind on their credit card payments. So basically, anytime you can kind of sense or figure out that somebody's in financial distress, they're going to have an issue at some point with a mortgage, because that's normally the biggest expense. So any list along those lines in relation to a distressed homeowner, it could even be people that are in divorce situations or people that, that go through probate. I have done a lot of short sales for people that, that passed away, and then their heirs were left with a house that was upside down or not in good shape, and they needed to negotiate with a bank.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We'll get another one. How long is the typical short sale process, and what factors might shorten or extend this timeline?
Yeah, so the short sale process length has changed so much. So just to give an idea, when I started, which was 2008, they didn't used to have short sale departments in banks. So there was a time when we used to be on the phone with Bank of America for 4 hours at a time on hold, waiting for somebody. They didn't have anybody. We were teaching them what they needed to do. It's like, okay, you need to do this. You need to get a BPO and all these things. So fun times. Over time, the process has changed so much. And by default, the amount of time it takes to do a short sale has changed. There was a time when the average was a year. I have done short sales in as little as 21 days. So what I can tell you is that right now, it takes between 3 and 6 months. So this time always changes. Could be less, could be more, depending on what systems they put in place. Industry-wide, right now, this is what it is. But what will lengthen it, as I said, is if you do the process the wrong way, basically the opposite way that it needs to be done. And what shortens it is if you are on it, you submit a complete packet and you push them, like you're on the phone with them all the time. I call the banks very, very often. I speak with multiple people. There have been times where I don't do this as much anymore because, again, now they actually have processes. They can't get away with as much stuff as they tried to get away with in the past. I would escalate stuff to the VP, the EVP, the whatever I had to do to get them to move files forward, especially to stop foreclosure. So this would all obviously shorten the amount of time. I will mention one thing I've not mentioned. They have a guideline today that did not exist until I want to say maybe recently, the last maybe couple of years, 3-4 years even, where you cannot submit a packet if it's 37 days. Okay, this is a big one. They will not initiate a short sale if you submit a packet less than 37 days before the foreclosure date, which if you heard what I said about the fact that in Missouri, a foreclosure date is only advertised for 21 days, technically you can never do a short sale again. Okay. So this is one way they will try to push you back. Basically, they try to eliminate as many short sales as they can. Now, I have ways around that, and it depends, again, on the investor. There are different ways that you can get foreclosure stopped and then to initiate a short sale, even though maybe you're within a week or two of the deadline. But, this is nitty-gritty. There's no point to go into that. But I'm saying your 37-day will be one of the issues you're going to run up against. And so the idea is that get to these sellers as early as you can. Try not to get them when they're already in foreclosure, basically in public notice.
Got it. Perfect. That's great. And then another question, What are some common challenges or delays encountered during the short sale approval process?
Okay, so the biggest challenge, as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges is the buyer walking away. That is really difficult to overcome because you got to restart the short sale every time you lose a buyer. Okay, and that's one. The other one, obviously, is dealing with these foreclosures. Just because they postpone, again, they don't call it cancel, but they canceled basically the foreclosure the first time, doesn't mean they're not restarting it. A lot of people, and again, in realtor short sales, I've heard people, they said, well, the bank was working with me and then they foreclosed. The bank doesn't know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing in banks. They have different departments for foreclosure and short sales and loss mitigation or whatever they call it. Each bank is different, which means that while you're doing a short sale, same story as you're doing loan modifications. While you're doing a loan modification, the bank will go and foreclose. And if you don't know enough to keep an eye on this and continue telling them you need to postpone and you keep pushing it, they end up foreclosing on you and you don't even know it. And the fact is that it's not assumed, don't take for granted that they will stop the foreclosure just because you're in the middle of doing a short sale loan modification. One other thing I meant to add is that these days, most of the time, for a borrower to be able to be allowed to go into a short sale process, they have to go through a loan modification first, which is a process that can take forever and they can foreclose on you while they do this. Most people are denied anyway. So you need to have a way to have that expedited as well. Basically, you want to fail that as quickly as possible so you can start a short sale.
Awesome. So I hope everybody's understanding here, like this is it's a lengthy process. It's a process where you need experience. So my advice, if you've never done one of these and you come across a client, don't try to go at it alone. I mean, it's certainly possible you can navigate through it, but call Maria and just, she's done so many of these over the years that it just makes it so much easier. And so I highly recommend that, especially because you get to keep your commission, right? It's a win for everybody. Your client's going to be in a much better spot. And then we had another question come up too. Leo, pop that one back up. I couldn't. How do short sales typically impact the seller's credit score, and how long does the recovery usually take?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't know. We don't know because the short sale itself. So as you know, FICO scores are secretive. The FICO formula is secretive. So there's talk in the industry that it impacts it by about 30 points, which is not very much. However, most people that come out of short sale, they have a really low credit score, and people think it's because of the short sale. It's not. It's because of the missed payments and all the things that have been going on. So you might be behind by months. And so it would take you maybe 12 months to recover your credit score. Because normally when you're just behind on payments, you miss payments, and then you don't miss anymore. In 12 months, you should be able to cure it. Now, there are certain loans where you still have to wait another year to be able to buy something new, but it's definitely better than a foreclosure, because a foreclosure basically is just as bad as a bankruptcy. So it might be 300-400 points that you lose at one time. Not only, but a foreclosure, you have to, every time you buy after that, you have to basically note that they will ask you, say if you had a foreclosure, and they can go back and forth 10 years, asking you basically for 10 years, you still have to disclose that you had a foreclosure. Whereas with a short sale, again, why is this? Why is a short sale treated differently? Because in a short sale, it's a negotiated agreement. That's what a short sale is. It's a negotiated agreement with the bank. So even though the bank lost some money, it looks like the borrower took care of business, said, okay, I have a situation that I couldn't help. It was through no fault of my own, and I want to talk with you. I'm talking with my lender. And what are lenders looking at? They're looking at, is this guy just going to walk away when there's a problem and stiff me with a balance, right? That's why short sales are treated much better, even from a credit score perspective, than foreclosures, because foreclosure really just shows that the borrower doesn't care, it's not trustworthy. That's what it is, right? On quotes, obviously, from a financial perspective, which is not, it's unfair, because a lot of people are so overwhelmed in dealing with real life situations where the house is the last of their concerns. So this is not to be, this is not meant to be judgmental or anything on anybody, because at the point where you are at the point of losing a home, you got stuff going on. I have done short sales. I did a short sale where everybody in the family had cancer. Just to say, I'm even impressed that they wanted to do a short sale. They had so much going on. These are real life situations, and they just, they deserve our sympathy, really. People don't normally go into foreclosure because they just didn't feel like paying the mortgage.
Yeah, very good point. Absolutely.
But that's why it's our job to show the bank these are good people, because bad stuff happens to good people too. Whereas the bank just treats everybody like you're a number in the system, right? They don't know who you are. They don't know what's happening. So it is our job to show them that, we're trying to do the best we can here. And this is one reason if you prove it to them, this is one reason they will actually go through the process.
Awesome. Very good. Cool. This was very, very, very helpful. I really appreciate it. I know everybody online appreciates it as well. So great information. Really appreciate you taking the time to share it today.
I really appreciate you having me, and I'm happy to have done this because, as I said, I know that there are people out there that need it. So I'm sure, you'll be able to help sellers this way. So I believe in what we do as realtors. I know we want to do the right thing. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And so Maria's phone number is right here on the screen. You can reach her directly there, or at any time you can call the office. We'll forward it on to her as well. So again, if you have people in that need a short sale, give Maria a call. She's a wealth of knowledge, as you can see. So Maria, thank you again. We appreciate it. And before we wrap up, tomorrow we have Boulder. If you want to get some lead generation in, we're doing an in-office lead generation class tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But Maria, thank you again. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care, everyone. Thank you.